Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. That's audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. That's betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
You're listening to the sweet sounds of Nerdery and Murdery.
You're an idiot. Welcome to another week of Nerdery and Murdery.
I'm Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of highs and lows, ups, downs, good and the bad, and the nerd and the murd. And Zig, I will let you take over with the nerdery side of the house.
Why, thank you, sir. Today, for episode 112, we're going to talk about the Seventh Doctor, cool. Sylvester McCoy.
Awesome.
McCoy portrayed the Seventh Doctor as a whimsical, thoughtful character who quickly became more layered, secretive, and manipulative as he went on. His first companion was Melanie Bush, played by Bonnie Langford, a computer programmer who had traveled with his previous incarnation and who is soon succeeded by troubled teenager and explosives expert Ace, played by Sophie Aldred, who becomes his protege. The Seventh Doctor first appeared on TV in 1987 after the program was canceled at the end of the 1989 season. The Seventh Doctor's adventures continued in novels until the late 1990s. The Seventh Doctor made an appearance at the start of the 1996 movie before the character was replaced by the Eighth Doctor, Paul McGann. Now, these novels, some of the writing for these novels was done by Russell T. Davis. This is where Russell T. Davis got on to Doctor Who.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so a lot of the ideas from this guy are what eventually matriculated into the new series.
Mm-hmm.
So the Doctor's outfit is an incarnation was calmer than his previous attire, but was idiosyncratic, as idiosyncratic as any of the others. It constituted an ivory safari jacket. Sometimes he wore like a tan or a beige one, and sometimes he wore a gray one, with a crimson paisley scarf worn under its lapels and a matching handkerchief in its left pocket. A fob watch chained to the left lapel, a plain white shirt, a scarlet paisley tie, a yellow-brown Ferris-themed pullover adorned with cherry question marks and turquoise zigzag patterns. I have wanted that sweater for years. They call them pullovers. They're sweater vests. That's what we call them over here. And then beige tweed plaid trousers and beige brogued spectator shoes. Wingtips. They call them spectator shoes or brogues. We call them wingtips. And an ivory colonial-style Panama cap. Spectator shoes are two-toned wingtips. And the Panama cap was his. He also had that wonderful question mark shaped umbrella that was also a cane, which you can now get. It is prohibitively expensive. It's like $200. I'm still going to get it. Even though we may never get rain again. Yes. And as my wife points out, I have kids. So in the first season, the Seventh Doctor started out as a comical character, engaging in Dundrianisms, which is where he would take idioms and mix them together, like time and tide melt the snowman, or when partner Mel is kidnapped, a bird in the hand keeps the Doctor away. He also played with spoons, and he made pratfalls. But later on, he started to develop a darker nature. The Seventh Doctor era is noted for the cancellation of Doctor Who after 26 years. It's also noted for the Virgin Books' New Adventures, a range of original novels published from 92 to 97. Again, this is where Russell T. Davies comes in. The Seventh Doctor's final appearance on television was in the 1996 Doctor Who television movie, where he regenerated into the Eighth Doctor, played by Paul McGann. A sketch of him is later seen in John Smith's Journal of Impossible Things in the new series. Episode Human Nature, a brief archival clips of the Seventh Doctor appear as holographic representations in The Next Doctor, The 11th Hour, The Day of the Doctor, Twice Upon a Time, The Name of the Doctor, and The Power of the Doctor. In The Power of the Doctor, he actually shows back up in Gallifreyan robes, and he looks great. He was in Lord of the Rings as Radagast, the one of the other wizards. But how it opens is the TARDIS is attacked by the Rani, and the Sixth Doctor is injured and forced to regenerate. After a brief period of post-regeneration, confusion, and amnesia, which is kind of helped along by the Rani by basically drugging him, the Seventh Doctor thwarted the Rani's plans and rejoined his companion Mel for whimsical adventures in an odd tower block in Welsh holiday camp in the 1950s. So they really get kind of weird and musical and funny in his first season. It's in his second season where it gets dark. And also, as we've talked about previously, the seasons were truncated, so they had more money to spend on special effects. The special effects in this are comparable to anything else going on in the late 80s at the time. Really, really wonderful. For Doctor Who, it was superb. The ancient entity known as Fenric was responsible for the Time Storm, which transported Ace from 1980's Paravel to Svartos in the distant future. So Ace is actually from the late 20th century, but she got moved to a different place in time. It is at this point that the Doctor starts to get more secretive, and he takes Ace under his wing and began teaching her about the universe. And he's still looking out for Fenric. The Doctor began taking a more scheming and proactive approach to defeating evil, using the Gallifreyan stellar manipulator named the Hand of Omega as part of the elaborate trap for the Daleks, which resulted in the destruction of the home planet Skaro. And soon afterwards, the Doctor uses a similar tactic in another Time Lord relic to destroy the Cybermen fleet. So he really starts taking on basically the baddies that he's been dealing with for the whole series. It was really good, really dark. But again, you didn't get as many of them, so they were really big on story time. It's the last episode where you get to see the brig, Brigadier Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. So he comes back for one, which is a really good one. They keep going back to Perryville, which is where Ace is from, because for some reason that little town is at a Nexial point. So a lot of weird things happen. People start disappearing from it. He goes back to Perryville in World War II, and Ace meets her mother as a baby. He deals with the Master, and he goes to Skaro and Gallifrey. At the opening, he basically is transporting the Master to be destroyed of the movie that came out in 1996. Is probably the best representation of the TARDIS I've ever seen for the 1996 movie. The 1996 movie is very hard to come by. I'm assuming eventually everybody will have it out, but it wasn't popular in the United States. It was big in England, but it was so much.
You mean the best looking inside the TARDIS? Because outside, they always look the same.
Yeah, inside the TARDIS.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. It was still a blue box.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, can't get much different than that. It's a blue box.
Yeah. Well, they changed the shade of blue, made it a little bigger, a little smaller, a little taller, but yeah, basically. But yeah, no, the inside, it looked like almost like an English home near the control room. He had like a rug and some nice easy chairs and a Victrola. And when they come back and do the 1996 movie, it's the same. Other parts of the TARDIS are very similar. So he basically is taking the Master to be destroyed on Skaro. The Master escapes, of course, and starts playing havoc in San Francisco, even though it was filmed in Canada. And the Master takes over Eric Roberts, and Eric Roberts gets to play the Master wonderfully in the 1996 film. I love it. I thought it was great. I was so jazzed to see it, but I think when it came out, you and I were working at the harbor, and we'd had like a really rough week. So I went over to Don's to watch it and fell asleep during it. Then I woke up later on. He's like, I recorded it. Don't worry. So we watched it on video like the next morning. Because I basically just passed out sitting on his couch. So yeah, we watched it the next day. And it aired on Fox, but because it didn't do very well for Fox, they kind of held the rights. So we didn't think we were ever going to get Doctor Who again when that series failed. But Russell T Davies was able to bring it back, and we have what we have now. Sylvester McCoy played the Doctor with a lot of heart, but as I said, there was a darker tinge to him. It was just fascinating to watch it. So yeah, his portrayal of the character is incredible, and I know I always give a recommendation. If you're not gonna see any other episodes, see The Curse of Fenric. Basically, it takes place in the early 60s on this in Perryville, which is right there on the edge of the North Sea. The Soviets come to basically invade because there's a listening post there. It's just amazing. It's not the 60s. I'm sorry. It's 1945. It's during World War II. So invade is a different. They're both fighting the Germans at the same time, but they get there, and the Fenric is this evil villain, and you also get to meet the Hemivore, which is what human beings will eventually evolve into if we don't stop poisoning the planet. Some of the mask work is amazing. It's a compelling story. It's you basically get these weird vampires. It kind of looks like the cast of the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie where they're kind of becoming part sea creatures.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They did that in Doctor Who in 1989.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. And some of the stuff is really, really good, particularly compared to what they've been doing just a few years ago on Doctor Who, light years ahead. But again, he presents himself as a more serious and contemplative person. He's still a bit of a showman, but he does kind of outmaneuver people, and he's the smartest guy in the room.
As always.
Yeah. He was absolutely opposed to violence of any sort, like in the battlefield and the Happiness Patrol. He always wants to get away from violence. So the Seventh Doctor, you never see him actually fight anything. It's mostly running and trying to figure things out. He employs variations of the talk to death tactic. Uses that in Dragonfire, Silver Nemesis, and The Curse of Fenric. Doctor also displays strange and alien characters, playing with the perception of his sense and his smell, and how he likes to listen to cheese. In Survival, he listens to an apple briefly. In Delta and the Bannerman, he displays a talent for hypnosis on various occasions.
Sorry, he listens to cheese and an apple?
He listens to cheese and an apple. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and it's weird. But it may just be a tactic to throw people off, because he's basically trying to figure stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
By examining, hey, this apple's going bad because of this bad field that's all around us. This cheese is not right because of this, this negative field that's around it.
Right.
So he says he's listening to cheese, but he's investigating. Battlefield is really great. You get to the point where you find out that there is a different universe where magic is still employed, and the Doctor is basically Merlin the magician in that universe. So the Arthurian legend takes place in this area around Mount Snowdon in Wales.
Mm-hmm.
It's an episode called Battlefield. But it turns out they're from a different universe. Really interesting. The first time they ever played with that, they play with it a lot in the new series with the new Cybermen.
Right.
And the first time they ever played with that was in the episode Battlefield. And you also get Lethbridge Stewart, played by Nicholas Courtney. Survival was the last episode, where basically this planet of cheetah people is stealing young people from Perivale, which is where Ace is from, and transporting them to their planet because their race is dying, and basically turning them into cat people. And the Master's involved in it, presumably to originally help the cheetah people, but being exposed to them starts to turn him into like a cheetah monster as well. Some of the cheetah costumes are not great, but the transition forms are really good. I got a dog barking. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. Not like we haven't had that before in my house.
That's true. Yes, somebody had to go to the bathroom really badly. And K3 is helping us out. Way to go, K3! So, yeah, this is a survival episode. The thing was, for many years, Doctor Who couldn't be shown any place outside of England until it had been on the air for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it had to be a year old. They got rid of that about 1987, so we were actually getting things just a few months after they were being shown in England. So we went from the 70s all the way up to 1989 and caught up with Doctor Who here on our local PBS station, KERA. The problem was when they aired that episode, Survival, none of us knew it was the last one.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, oh, hey, it's going to be great. And they sent out some stills of how they were going to change the TARDIS and how the Doctor's outfit was going to be changed and stuff. So we were eagerly awaiting that in 1990. We figured it'd be a couple of months, it'd be in England, and then it would be over here, right? And then right before they started shooting, they canceled it. But we didn't get word over here for months. And my friend Angela's like, Doctor Who's done. I'm like, what? We were seniors in high school.
Yeah.
You know? I'm like, what? She's like, Doctor Who is done. What do you mean it's done? They canceled it. Oh, they'll bring it back. They canceled it in 85 and ran a bunch of, for a year and a half and then brought it right back. We got this. They'll do it again. She's like, no, I don't think you understand. They can't. And they did. It was Michael Grade. He canceled Doctor Who.
Right.
I curse his bones for that.
And that's the start of the dark times for the Doctor Who fans.
The start of the dark times. We did not get any new Doctor Who till 1996. And we got one movie, and then we didn't get anything again until 2005.
Right.
It was the dark times. But if you consider him going through the movie and the time he was in Doctor Who, the longest running Doctor Who is Sylvester McCoy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because Paul McGann only went 9 years, and I believe Sylvester McCoy went something like 10, technically. But yeah, we were sad. We were really, really sad because we didn't know at the beginning. They had a lot of great guest stars because everybody wanted to do it for season 24, 25, and 26. But we didn't get that many shows. We got Time in the Ronnie, which is the first one, which is the first time you really get to see the good special effects.
Mm-hmm.
Paradise Towers, which is a great one. Delta and the Bannermen. I like that one. It's not great, but it's okay. A lot of really interesting character actor work. We got Dragonfire, which is where he loses Melanie and picks up Ace. We get and season 25, we get Remembrance of the Daleks, The Happiness Patrol, Silver Nemesis, and The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. These are the really kind of dark ones. In season 26, we get Battlefield, Ghostlight, The Curse of Fenric, and Survival. And that was it. That's all we got. That's where the dark time started. But they were really, really up in their game. Particularly season 25 and 26 may have been some of the best Doctor Who, both technically and written,
mm-hmm.
best written
mm-hmm.
that we ever got in the original series. And the reason that the new series is as good as it is because of those last two seasons, because they basically pick right up where that left off. But if you're only going to watch one series or one story from Sylvester McCoy, I would recommend The Curse of Fenric.
Mm-hmm.
Just for its Silver Nemesis is also good. The Greatest Show in the Galaxy is good. The Happiness Patrol is good. They're all good. There's not a single one that's bad. Delta and the Bannerman is not my favorite, but you do get a lot of good character actors in it, so it's fun. And it's a compelling story. They also do a lot of explosions, which they hadn't done in years previous. Like you get a lot of explosions with John Pertwee and the first part of Tom Baker, and you don't get many after that. Well, you get explosions in space, but actually, pyrotechnics and stuff, people getting thrown when a bomb goes off or something. Yeah, you get a lot of that in things like Delta and the Bannerman. But yeah, those would be my recommendations. I loved it because I thought they were going in a great direction, and then they canceled it. It was really sad, especially with with Ace. Sophie Aldred went on to be a fixture at conventions after this. Bonnie Langford was already a star, but she was like a West End. It wasn't over here. She was over in England. But they ended up both showing up in the last couple of episodes of the last season. Both Bonnie Langford and Sophie Aldred. So it was nice to see them again. Also, Sophie Aldred was supposed to be like an 18-year-old in the series, and at the time she was like 26. But she pulled it off. I mean, you really thought she was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's about it for Sylvester McCoy, the Seventh Doctor. The next episode, I'm probably going to talk about the Eighth Doctor and the War Doctor, just because there's not a lot of information about them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they didn't produce a lot, so it'll be Paul McGann and John Hurd.
Right.
I'll just do them together because I was trying to figure out how I would do this. So I'll do the Eighth Doctor and the War Doctor, and then the next episode after that, we will get into the new series with Chris Eccleston.
Chris Eccleston, yep. Cool. Awesome.
Well, sorry to nerd out on Doctor Who again.
No, yeah. I think people have enjoyed it, and I think it's really good to do each incarnation of the Doctor. I think it's really cool. Hopefully, some people will give some of those older ones a shot. I'll be excited when we reach Chris Eccleston, because then we're starting towards the series that I'm much more familiar with.
Much more familiar with.
Yes. So that'll be cool. But no, thank you for that. Thank you for another trip with Doctor Who. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Well, then with that, we will step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off All That's Interesting, Crime Museum, Wikipedia, and Biography, and this is the story of Ed Gein.
Ed Gein.
You know Ed Gein.
Original.
Yes.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes. So if you've ever wondered where influences of horror films such as Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre come from, they were inspired from the infamous case of Edward Ed Theodore Gein.
Ed Gein.
Ed was responsible for multiple crimes, including the deaths of Mary Hogan in 1954 and Bernice Worden in 1957. Edward Theodore Gein, who was born on August 27, 1906, was also known as the Butcher of Plainfield or the Plainfield Ghoul. He was an American murderer and body snatcher. Gein's crimes committed around his hometown of Plainfield, Wisconsin, gathered widespread notoriety in 1957 after authorities discovered he had exhumed corpses from local graveyards and fashioned trophies and keepsakes from their bones and skin. Gein also confessed to killing two women, tavern owner Mary Hogan again in 54 and hardware store owner Bernice Worden in 57. Gein was initially found unfit to stand trial and confined to a mental health facility. By 1968, he was judged competent to stand trial, and he was found guilty of the murder of Worden, but he was found legally insane and remanded to a psychiatric institution.
Yeah, because he was crazy.
Yeah. He died at the Mendota Mental Health Institute from respiratory failure resulting from lung cancer on July 26, 1984 at age 77, and he's buried next to his family in the Plainfield Cemetery in a now unmarked grave. He was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin, the second of two boys of George Philip Gein and Augusta Wilhelmine Gein. Augusta was fervently religious and nominally Lutheran. She preached to her sons about the innate immortality of the world, the evil of drinking, and her belief that all women, apart from herself, were naturally promiscuous and the instruments of the devil. She reserved time every afternoon to read to them from the Bible, usually selecting verses from the Old Testament and the book of Revelation concerning death, murder, and divine retribution. She also hated her husband, an alcoholic who was unable to keep a job. He had worked at various times as a carpenter, tanner, and insurance salesman. During his time in La Crosse, George owned a local grocery shop, but he soon sold the business and left the city with his family to live in isolation on a 155-acre farm in the town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, which became the Gein family's permanent residence. Frantic to protect her family from the evil which she believed lurked around every corner, Augustus insisted they move from La Crosse, which was a sinkhole of filth, she thought, to Plainfield.
A sinkhole of filth.
Uh-huh.
Nice.
Even there, Augustus had the family settle outside of town since she believed that living in the town would corrupt her two young sons. And Augusta took advantage of the farm's isolation by turning away outsiders who would have influenced her sons. Gein only left the farm to attend school, and outside of school, Gein spent most of the time doing chores on the farm. Gein was shy, and classmates and teachers remembered him as having strange mannerisms, such as seemingly random laughter as if he were laughing at his own personal jokes. And what's more, Ed's lazy eye and speech impediment made him an easy victim of bullies.
Speech impediment, uber religious upbringing. It's like they're trying to make a serial killer.
Well, to make matters worse, Augusta punished him whenever he tried to make friends. Despite this, Ed adored his mother. He absorbed her lessons about the world and seemed to embrace her harsh worldview. And although his brother Henry sometimes stood up to Augusta, Ed never did. Despite his poor social development, Ed did fairly well in school, particularly in reading. On April 1st, 1940, his father George died of heart failure caused by his alcoholism at age 66. Ed and his brother Henry began doing odd jobs around town to help cover living expenses, and the brothers were generally considered reliable and honest by residents of the community. While both worked as handymen, Ed also frequently babysat for his neighbors. He enjoyed babysitting, seeming to relate easily more to children than adults. Henry began dating a divorced mother of two and planned to move in with her. He worried about his brother's attachment to their mother and often spoke ill of her around Ed, who responded with shock and hurt. On May 16, 1944, Ed was burning away marsh vegetation on the property, and the fire got out of control, drawing the attention of the local fire department. By the end of the day, the fire having been extinguished and the firefighters gone, Ed reported his brother missing. With lanterns and flashlights, a search party searched for 43-year-old Henry, whose dead body was found lying face down, and apparently he had been dead for some time, and it appeared that the cause of death was heart failure since he had not been burned or injured otherwise. It was later reported by biographer Harold Schechter that Henry had bruises on his head. The police dismissed the possibility of foul play, and the county coroner later officially listed asphyxiation as the cause of death. The authorities accepted the accident theory, but no official investigation was conducted and an autopsy was not performed.
So he may have killed his brother as well.
It's possible. When questioning Gein about the death of Bernice Ward in 1957, state investigator Joe Wilmovsky brought up questions about Henry's death, and George Arndt, who studied the case, wrote that in retrospect it was possible and likely that Henry's death was the Cain and Abel aspect of this case. After Henry's suspicious death, Ed and his mother were now alone. Augusta had a paralyzing stroke shortly after Henry's death, and Ed devoted himself to taking care of her. Sometime in 1945, he later recounted that he and his mother visited a man named Smith who lived nearby to purchase straw. And according to Gein, Augusta witnessed Smith beating a dog. A woman inside the Smith home came outside and yelled for him to stop, but Smith beat the dog to death. Augusta was extremely upset by the scene. However, what bothered her did not appear to be the brutality towards the dog, but rather the presence of the woman. Augusta told Ed that the woman was not married to Smith and she had no business being there, and angrily called her Smith's harlot. She had a second stroke soon after and her health deteriorated rapidly.
All I can hear is Bobby Boucher, that woman is the devil.
Yes. Augusta died on December 29, 1945, at the age of 67, and Ed was devastated by her death. In the words of the author Harold Schechter, he had lost his only friend and one true love, and he was obviously alone in the world. Ed held on to the farm and earned money from odd jobs. He boarded up rooms used by his mother, including the upstairs, downstairs parlor, and living room, leaving them untouched. And while the rest of the house became increasingly squalid, these rooms remained pristine. Ed lived thereafter in a small room next to the kitchen. It was around this time he became interested in reading pulp magazines and adventure stories, particularly those involving cannibals or Nazi atrocities, specifically from Ilse Koch, who selected tattooed prisoners for death in order to fashion lampshades and other items for their skins. Ed filled his days by learning about Nazi medical experiments, studying human anatomy, consuming porn, although he never attempted to date any real-life women, and reading horror novels. He also began to indulge in his sick fantasies, but it took a long time for anyone to realize it. Gein was a handyman and received a farm subsidy from the federal government starting in 1951. He occasionally worked for the local municipal road crew and crop threshing crews in the area, and sometime between 1946 and 1956, he also sold an 80-acre parcel of his land that his brother Henry had owned. For a full decade, no one thought much about the Gein family outside of town. But everything changed in 1957 when a local hardware store owner named Bernice Worden vanished, leaving nothing behind but bloodstains. On the morning of November 16, 1957, 58-year-old Plainfield hardware store Bernice Worden disappeared. A Plainfield resident reported that the hardware store's truck had been driven out from the rear of the building around 9:30 a.m. The hardware store saw few customers the entire day, and some area residents believe this was because of deer hunting season. Warden's son, Deputy Sheriff Frank Worden, entered the store around 5 p.m. to find the store's cash register open and bloodstains on the floor leading out the back. Frank Worden told investigators that on the evening before his mother's disappearance, Gein had been seen in the store and that he was to have returned the next morning for a gallon of antifreeze. A sales slip for a gallon of antifreeze was the last receipt written by Worden on the morning she disappeared, and on the evening of the same day, Ed Gein was arrested at West Plainfield grocery store, and the Waushara County Sheriff's Department searched the Gein farm. A Waushara County Sheriff's deputy discovered Warden's decapitated body in a shed on Gein's property, hung upside down by her legs with a crossbar at her ankles and ropes at her wrists. The torso was dressed out like a deer. She had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle, and the mutilations were made after her death. When searching the house, authorities found whole human bones and fragments, a wastebasket made of human skins covering several chair seats, skulls on his bedpost, female skulls with some of the tops sewn off, bowls made from human skulls, a corset made from a female torso, skin from shoulder to waist, leggings made from human leg skin, masks made from the skin of female heads, Mary Hogan's face mask in a paper bag, Mary Hogan's skull in a box, Bernice Warden's entire head in a burlap sack, Bernice Warden's heart in a plastic bag in front of Gein's potbelly stove, 9 vulvae in a shoebox, a young girl's dress and the vulvas of 2 females judged to have been about 15 years old, a belt made from female human nipples, 4 noses, a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, a lampshade made from the skin of a human face, and fingernails from female fingers. Whew. Jesus.
Crazy.
Yeah. These artifacts were photographed at the State Crime Laboratory and then decently disposed of. When questioned, Gein told investigators that between 1947 and 1952, he made as many as 40 nocturnal visits to 3 local graveyards to exhume recently buried bodies when he was in a daze-like state. He readily admitted that he collected most of the remains from 3 local graveyards, which he started to visit 2 years after Augusta's death. He told police he'd gone to the graveyards in a daze looking for bodies that he thought resembled his mother. On about 30 of those visits, he said that he came out of the daze while in the cemetery, left the grave in good order, and returned home empty-handed. On the other occasions, he dug up the graves of recently buried middle-aged women he thought resembled his mother and took their bodies home where he tanned their skins to make his paraphernalia. Ed also explained to authorities that he wanted to create a, quote, woman suit so that he could become his mother and crawl into her skin.
Goodbye, horses.
Right. Gein admitted to stealing from 9 graves from local cemeteries and led investigators to the locations. Alan Wilimowski of the State Crime Laboratory participated in opening the 3 test graves identified by Gein. The caskets were inside wooden boxes. The top boards ran crossways, not lengthwise, and the tops of the boxes were about 2 feet below the surface in sandy soil. Ed had robbed the graves soon after the funerals while the graves were not completed. The test graves were exhumed because authorities were uncertain as to whether the slight Gein was capable of single-handedly digging up the grave during a single evening. They were found as Gein described. 2 exhumed graves were found empty, one had a crowbar in place of the body. 1 casket was empty, and 1 casket Gein had failed to open when he lost his pry bar, and most of the body was gone from the 3rd grave, yet Gein had returned rings and some body parts. Thus, Gein's confession was largely corroborated. Gein denied having sex with the bodies he exhumed, explaining they smelled too bad. However, some reports said he did admit to necrophilia. During State Crime Laboratory interrogation, Gein also admitted to shooting 51-year-old Mary Hogan, the tavern owner missing since December 8, 1954, whose head was found in his house, but he later denied memory of the details of her death. A 16-year-old whose parents were friends of Gein, who attended ball games and movies with him, reported that Gein kept shrunken heads in his house, which Gein had described as relics from the Philippines sent by a cousin who served on the islands during World War II. Upon investigation by the police, these were determined to be human facial skins carefully peeled from corpses and used by Gein as masks. During his questioning, Washoe County Sheriff Art Shelley reportedly assaulted Gein by banging his head and face into a brick wall, and as a result, Gein's initial confession was ruled inadmissible. Shelley died of heart failure at age 43 in 1968 before Gein's trial. Many who knew Shelley said he was traumatized by the horror of Gein's crimes, and this, along with the fear of having to testify, especially about assaulting Gein, caused his death. One of his friends said, quote, "He was a victim of Ed Gein as surely as if he had butchered him." In addition to the murders of Hogan and Warden, Gein was also considered a suspect in several other unsolved cases in Wisconsin. In November 1957, authorities confronted Gein with a list of missing person cases that had occurred between the deaths of his mother and Warden. Their suspicions were further aroused after discovery of the remains of Hogan. However, lie detector tests seemingly exonerated Gein of any of the murders, and his psychiatrist concluded that his violence was only directed to women who physically resembled his mother. 8-year-old Georgia Jean Weckler disappeared from her farm in rural Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin at approximately 3:30 p.m. on May 1st, 1947. She was given a lift home from school in Jefferson, Wisconsin by a neighbor who dropped Weckler off at the lane that led from U.S. Highway 12 to the Weckler farmhouse. Weckler was last seen pausing to open the family mailbox and removing a stack of mail, but she was never seen again. Witnesses reported seeing a dark-colored, possibly black 4-door 1936 Ford sedan with a gray plastic spotlight in the vicinity that afternoon. Gein did own a black 1937 Ford. Evelyn Grace Hartley, 15 years old, went missing while babysitting a 20-month-old girl at the home of La Crosse State College professor Viggo Rasmussen on the evening of October 24, 1957 in La Crosse. That evening, Evelyn's father called the Rasmussen house several times after she failed to check in at planned 8:30 p.m., and he received no answer. So concerned, he drove to the Rasmussen house. When Richard arrived, the doors were locked, the lights and radio were on, and items were scattered all over the house. The living room furniture had been moved around to different places, as were Evelyn's school books. Richard found her shoes in different rooms, one shoe upstairs and one downstairs, and he also found his daughter's broken glasses upstairs. Richard did not find Evelyn in the house. After his arrest, Gein was considered a suspect in Evelyn's disappearance after he was visiting a relative a few blocks away from the Rasmussen house at the time. However, Gein denied involvement in the disappearance and passed 2 lie detector tests, and police found no trace of Evelyn's remains during a search of Gein's Plainfield property. Well, we know about lie detector tests.
Yep.
On November 1st, 1950, 41-year-old farmer Victor Harold Bunk Travis, a resident of Adams County, Wisconsin, went off to hunt deer in the company of 43-year-old Milwaukee acquaintance Raymond Burgess. In the late afternoon, the pair stopped for refreshments at Mac's Bar in Plainfield for several hours. Around 7 p.m., they both left the bar, got into Burgess's car, and drove away. The two hunters, along with the car Burgess was driving, was never seen again, and no traces of them were found. Travis and Burgess had been hunting on the farm next to Gein's, despite his objections on the day to their disappearance. In addition, Gein was also tentatively linked to the June 1954 disappearance of 31-year-old neighbor James Walsh. Walsh's wife and her husband lived near Gein, and he performed chores for her after her husband went missing. Gein was also investigated for potential involvement in the 1956 disappearance of 30-year-old Irene Keating, who was last seen in Plainsfield, Wisconsin, and in the attempted abduction of 16-year-old Judy Rodenkall from Aurora, Wisconsin. On November 21st, 1957, Ed Gein was arraigned on one count of first-degree murder in Washara County Court, where he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and found mentally incompetent, thus unfit for trial. He was sent to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, which is now the Dodge Correctional Institution, which is a maximum security facility in Waupun, Wisconsin, and later transferred to the Mendota State Hospital in Madison,
in
1968, doctors determined that Gein was mentally able to confer with counsel and participate in his defense. The trial began on November 7, 1968, and lasted 1 week. A psychiatrist testified that Gein had told him that he did not know whether the killing of Bernice Worden was intentional or accidental. Gein had told him that while he examined a gun in Worden's store, the gun went off, killing Worden, and Gein testified that after trying to load a bullet into the rifle, it discharged. He said he had not aimed the rifle at Worden and did not remember anything else that happened that morning. At the request of the defense, Gein's trial was held without jury, with Judge Robert H. Golmar presiding, and Gein was found guilty by Golmar on November 14th. A second trial dealt with Gein's sanity after testimony by doctors for the prosecution and defense. Golmar ruled Gein not guilty by reason of insanity and ordered him committed to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. Gein spent the rest of his life in a mental hospital, and Judge Golmar wrote, due to prohibitive costs, Gein was only tried for one murder, that of Mrs. Worden. He also admitted to killing Mary Hogan. Gein's house and 195-acre property were appraised at $4,700, which is the equivalent of $48,000 today. His possessions were scheduled to be auctioned on March 30th, 1958, amid rumors that the house and the land it stood on might become a tourist attraction. And early in the morning of March 20th, the house was destroyed by a fire. A deputy fire marshal reported that a garbage fire had been set 75 feet from the house by a cleaning crew who were given the task of disposing of refuse, and that hot coals were recovered from the spot of the bonfire, but the fire did not spread along the ground from that location to the house. Arson was suspected, but the cause of the fire was never officially determined. It's possible that the fire was not considered a matter of urgency by Fire Chief Frank Worden, who was the son of Bernice Worden, Gein's last victim. When Gein learned of the incident while in detention, he shrugged and said, just as well. Gein's 1949 Ford sedan, which he used to haul the bodies of his victims, was sold at public auction for $760, or the equivalent of $7,700 today, to Carnival sideshow operator Bunny Gibbons. Gibbons charged carnival goers 25 cents admission just to see it. Ed died at the Mendota Mental Hospital Institute due to respiratory failure, secondary to lung cancer, on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77. Over the years, souvenir seekers chipped pieces from his gravestone at the Plainfield Cemetery until the stone itself was stolen in 2000. It was recovered in 2001 near Seattle, Washington, and placed in storage at the Washara County Sheriff's Department. The gravesite itself is now unmarked but not unknown, and Gein is interred between his parents and his brother in the cemetery. Gein's story has had a lasting effect on American popular culture, as evidenced by its numerous appearances in film, music, and literature. The tale first came to widespread public attention in the fictionalized version presented by Robert Bloch in his 1959 suspense novel Psycho. In addition to Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 film of Bloch's novel, Gein's story was loosely adapted into numerous films, including Deranged in 1974, In the Light of the Moon 2000, Ed Gein, The Butcher of Plainfield in 2007, Ed Gein, the Musical in 2010, and the Rob Zombie film's House of a Thousand Corpses and its sequel, The Devil's Rejects. Gein served as the inspiration for a myriad of fictional serial killers, most notably Norman Bates of Psycho, Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs, Garland Green from Con Air, Castillo Serrano, House of the Dead, and Otis Driftwood from House of Thousand Corpses, Devil Rejects, and Three from Hell, and the character Dr. Oliver Thredson from the TV series American Horror Story Asylum. American filmmaker Errol Morris and German filmmaker Werner Herzog attempted unsuccessfully to collaborate on a film project about Gein from 1975 to 1976. Morris interviewed Gein several times and ended up spending almost a year in Plainfield interviewing dozens of locals. The pair planned secretly to exhume Ed's mother from her grave to test a theory, but never followed through on the scheme and eventually ended their collaboration.
That sounds like Werner Herzog.
Yeah.
Nuts.
The aborted project was described in a 1989 New Yorker profile of Morris. The character Patrick Bateman in the 1991 novel American Psycho and its 2000 film adaptation mistakenly attributes a quote by Edward Kemper to Ed Gein, saying, "You know what Ed Gein said about women? He said, when I see a pretty girl walking down the street, I think two things. One part of me wants to take her out, talk to her, be a real nice and sweet and treat her right. The other part wonders what her head would look like on a stick." In 2012, German director Jörg Buttgereit wrote and directed a stage play about a case of Gein called Cannibal und Liebe at Theater Dortmund in Germany. The part of Ed Gein was played by actor Uwe Robeck. According to George W. Arndt, news reports at the time of Gein's crime spawned a subgenre of black humor called Geiners. In 2022, Ed Gein was featured in an episode of Netflix Dahmer Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, as a possible inspiration for Jeffrey Dahmer. I always wondered that myself. Direct connection between the two is only speculation, though. And finally, Ed Gein inspired American thrash metal band Slayer to write a song called Dead Skin Mask from their 1990 album Seasons in the Abyss.
Slayer, yeah. Sorry.
And that is the story of Ed Gein.
Well, thank you, sir. That was a fun ride.
Yeah, I knew you'd know who Ed Gein was. Just figured you probably didn't know the whole story.
Thank you. I didn't. I actually thought he killed a lot more people than that.
Well, it's speculated. He's they don't know, because are the bodies all from the graveyard? Are they from other people? The disappearances. They speculate because but everything's circumstantial. They could only get him with, they only charged him with one, but I mean he's definitely responsible for two, and the rest is all speculation. Yep.
Right on.
Yep. So thanks for spending another week with me on that. We appreciate each and every one of you that took the time to listen to our show for this week. As always, you can find more information on nerdyandmurdery.com. You can find the links to everything we talked about, pictures from our show, as well as other interesting information. You also find a link to our merchandise and our Patreon, where if you wish to help out with the cost of the show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, we do appreciate each and every one of you. And don't forget to check out TikTok and YouTube, where Zig likes to put up funny videos, things all the time. So make sure to check those out as well.
Goofy stuff. Thanks, sir.
Awesome. So with that for this week,
I have been Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery.
Cue the music.